like to welcome you to the June 27th, 2023 City of Roseville Public Utilities Commission meeting. This 7-member commission is responsible for studying and advising the City Council regarding all utilities owned or operated by the city, including electric, water, wastewater, and solid waste. The Public Utilities Commission advises the City Council regarding planning, rates, public information, cable, television franchises, and other matters relating to such enterprises, and may also hear citizen complaints as to the operation or rates. The Public Utilities Commission also advises the City Council regarding the activities of such joint power agencies as the city may be a member of, or which relate to such utility enterprises. At this time, I would like to ask everyone, please put your electronic devices on silent. Next item is roll call. Lynn, can you please call the roll?
Sure. Commissioner Bilski?
Here.
Commissioner DeMarkey?
Here.
Commissioner DeLacy?
Here.
Commissioner Granger is excused this evening. Chair Knox?
Here.
Commissioner Meisch?
Here.
And Vice Chair Webb.
Here.
Thank you.
Next, Commissioner Webb, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Item 4 on the agenda is public comments. This item is for anyone who would like to address the commission on any item that is not on tonight's agenda. When addressing the commission, please state your first and last name for the record. All right, the next item on the agenda is the approval of the May 23rd, 2023 and the May 30th, 2023 meeting minutes. Would anyone like to make a motion on the May 23rd minutes?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Next, would anyone like to make a motion on the May 30th minutes?
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions?
Abstention.
Abstention.
Next on the agenda is the requests and presentations. Item 6.1, Roseville Electric Utility Monthly Update. Report by Electric Utility Director Dan Bean summarizing the monthly status of electric utility activities for information.
Thank you. Good evening, Honorable Chair and Commissioners. So I'm going to be really brief because we have two amazing presentations following me from some very informed staff members. I will take any questions if you have any on the quarterly report. Otherwise, I just want to let you know that our flying crews were out for a couple weeks, the last week of April and the first week of May, working at the Navajo Nation, helping people out there get power the first time. There's over 15,000 families that have no electricity in their homes. Where? Which means the Navajo Nation, which is United States, like Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and they don't have running water, they don't have refrigeration, they don't have internet. They're raising their families. Some of them have been there for 90 years. They never had power. So this year, with the American Public Power Association coordinating it, volunteer crews from SMUD, from Roseville, from across the country went out there. And during this phase, I believe over 150 families received electricity for the first time. So wow. That was a huge undertaking, and it was really great for our crews to be involved in that. We took our apprentices who get to work on overhead lines, which, Roseville were mostly underground, so it's a good chance for them to get out there and work overhead, and it counts for their apprentice programs. But just overall, a really good effort. It's been going on this is the 4th year. It's probably going to take another 10 to 15 years or more to get everybody on board. So anyway, just wanted to report that out, and at some point we'll probably have more pictures and things. But Roseville was recognized at the American Public Power Association National Conference last week. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Do any commissioners have questions for the staff at this time? No. Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward and address the commission on this item? All right, thank you for the update, Dan. Item 6.2, Roseville Electric Advanced Metering Infrastructure, AMI Project Update. Presentation by AMI Project Manager Caitlin Ornelas.
Yep.
Providing an update on the Roseville Electric Advanced Metering Infrastructure Project for information.
Wonderful. Good evening, thank you. All right, we can get started. Perfect. Jump into the next slide. So I'm really excited tonight to provide an update as to where we're at with the project. We've been working on this for quite some time, and we're really hitting our last stride into our final phase. So wanted to provide this group just an overview of where we're at, remind you of what we're working through and implementing, and then what we have to look forward to over the next year, and how that all affects us. So just as a high-level overview of what the project is, to get everybody back on the same page, our AMI project is a joint multi-year project working with both of our electric and water utilities to modernize our metering infrastructure. So this new metering infrastructure will include advanced metering, which will send wireless readings and important service information to both of our utilities to support our water and electric utilities. It will allow us to provide better customer service, reliability with fewer outages, and the ability for quicker restorations as we progress throughout the project. The information that we receive from the advanced meters will actually allow us to share and learn and build off of the data that's coming in to allow customers the ability, as well as our own utilities, the ability to create efficiencies on how water and energy is consumed and distributed throughout our city. And finally, one of the key pieces that we will benefit from long-term is just the insight to distributed generation resources and the support that it will have for grid optimization as we move forward and continue to build out this program for the utility. All right, so just a quick overview of where we started and where we're at. So in 2017, we started with our contracting process. So that was working with our vendors, our consultants to really hone in on what services, what technology, what hardware we wanted to use. As we moved into 2018 and to 2020, a lot of efforts by our vendor partners as well as our Roseville staff, technology staff, really worked to develop and configure our systems, built out a multi-system integration that will allow us to send information back through our enterprise systems, and really making sure that we can keep data integrity and data flowing so that we can manage our customers properly, whether it's from taking care of a meter all the way through to billing and so forth. As we moved into 2020 and into 22, those last 2 years we spent a lot of our time going through comprehensive meter communications, network and systems integration testing. We needed to, it was a core piece to make sure that we were comfortable with the information and the tools and the systems and the hardware that we were putting in place, that they were going to work and meet the needs of not just the utility, but our customers as well. So we had a lot of dedicated focus from collective staff to support that effort over the past 2 years. And so that was extremely successful and allowed us to move into our first phase, which was in March. We'll go with that. So which was, that's all right, where we started to install our first round of meters in March to see how that looked, the behaviors, what we were seeing. And I'll talk about that here in a second. But then we've reached the point that we are in that final stage of what we're calling our full deployment stage, which is mass meter upgrade installation, which will start here in just a handful of days in July and will last about 12 to 14 months. Okay, so just an overview of what that phase one looked like, how it operated. So we were installing meters, both water and electric meters, in about 800 utility customer locations. The area was between Wood Creek and Blue Oaks, so that was our phase one area. It did include both residential and commercial customers and a couple different varieties, so we could really make sure that, again, as we expanded, we knew how things behaved. Additionally, a couple things I wanted to highlight, that these meter installations were performed by both our contractor, so we'll have a third-party contractor supporting our installations, as well as our Roseville internal staff staff, our electric metering staff, supported that effort. And then the other piece to our phase one was initiating our customer outreach campaign. So customer outreach and communication is a core component of this project, not just the upgrade piece of the meter. And so it was very important to us to make sure that we rolled that out successfully and learned from that feedback. A couple positive outcomes that came out of it is during this phase one March installation of these meters, we had 100% of the installations completed ahead of schedule. So that was definitely a testament to our contractor as well as to our Roseville staff to execute successfully. And then it also allowed us to validate that meter communication, the system performance before we hit this mass scale. So let's talk about what this mass scale is. This full deployment area on the right. Like I said, it will kick off in July, just in a handful of days. We will be starting and installing about 64,000 electric meters and 50,000 water endpoints, water meters throughout every city location. It'll take us about 12 to 14 months to complete that effort. We are utilizing the same resources that we used in the phase one. So our vetted contractor, as well as our Roseville resources on the electric side to perform those installations. And then we will continue and have actually expanded on our customer outreach campaign as our scope has broadened quite a bit for full deployment. So we are looking to start July and end in September of 2024. I did want to show you what our full deployment area looked like. So this is our map of our city. It's kind of hard to see, but this information is all available to our customers, accessible online on our website. But it does highlight and show kind of throughout the areas of the city when a customer can expect their meter upgrade to take place. So you can see we've got about 5 or 6 pockets of areas that will have a meter installation take place within the next 3 months, and we'll just continue to build as we move forward into next year. All right. And then lastly, I wanted to highlight and focus a little bit on our customer outreach program, because again, it is a core component to this program and to this process. We need to make sure that our customers are educated and fully aware of what is happening. So from a residential perspective, our customers will be receiving a postcard 1 month in advance of their installation with some general information of, hey, we're coming to your house in the coming weeks. This is what you can expect. These are some benefits of the meter upgrade program. If you have any questions, please feel free to give us a call, or you can go online and obtain more information. So that is the start. Additionally, we will have a door hanger that will be placed at all of the locations, again, informing them about a week or 2 prior to us getting out there that they will be out on site, make sure that we have access, and we'll be performing that meter change out. Additionally, when we arrive at the location, we will be performing a door knock, notifying the resident that we are performing their meter upgrade, and if we need to make any accommodations, we can do so at that time. And then from a commercial perspective, our small commercial customers will be notified via our chamber e-blasts, as well as meetings, just other ways of communication that we can that we have already teed up with our small commercial customers until project completion. So this will be a monthly activity. Additionally, as we're swapping out those meters, we will be out in the community. They can easily stop. We'll be happy to answer questions. From our large commercial customers, we will have direct communication from our key accounts team. We'll work to coordinate appointments, the right time for them, making sure that they understand what this means to them, what they can expect, the timeline. So a lot of our large commercial customers will take place into next year, just to make sure that all of our processes and procedures are in place to reduce any potential impact to those larger customers. And then I also wanted to highlight some other outreach platforms, which is just notifications through business cards as we're out in the field. If customers have questions, we can pass along information. They can direct to our customer service team. We have social media messaging and our project website, like I mentioned earlier. So that is really a highlight and overview of where we're at with the project, where we're going for the next year. So I'll be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Do any commissioners have questions for the staff at this time?
Just a simple question.
Sure.
Physically, are these about the same size as what is there now? Is
Yes.
it a direct replacement?
Correct. There's no infrastructure changes at the residential or commercial locations. It's completely, the customers do not need to do anything.
No, there's wiring installed, wiring needed for the transmitter, so they'll be, are they battery operated or are they?
So on the electric side, the wiring's already in place. They're basically taking out their old meter, putting a new meter in. Takes just a couple of minutes. On the water side, it's very similar activity. We're taking out an older device that already has the infrastructure and harnessing in place and putting in a new one. Thank you for the question.
I was also curious about the hardware. So how are you picking up the signal? Have you got fixed base, or are you roving around in a van?
No, that is what kind of we do today. We'll drive around and collect reads and things like that today for billing purposes. But as we move into this metering, the new infrastructure, they do talk to us, or we built out a mesh network as part of this process, so the meters do talk. We have what is called a connected grid router. We have about 36 of them, 38 installed throughout the city, and they communicate through that path and then up and through the system.
Our own, we're not using somebody else's old cell phone?
No, they communicate through the Verizon network, but we have our communication or our access points are Roseville owned and only can be accessed by Roseville.
So the downtime is minutes?
Yes,
Seconds.
yes, it's more like, it's closer to seconds. We have informed our customers it could be between 10 to 15 minutes, just in the event they run into an issue out in the field that would require some additional time. So we want to properly set those expectations. But in all reality, it does just take a handful of seconds.
Now, do customers have the option of opting out?
Yes, they do. So we do have an opt-out program that is on our project website as well as our city website. It gives them all the forms. If they also can call into our customer service team, and they will help them fill out the request and process the opt-out. Additionally, if our contractors or any of our Roseville staff is out in the field and the customer says, no, we will pass them contact information to reach out to our customer service team so they can go through the proper channels to either opt out or potentially re-engage back into the program. So there is options available for all of them. Appreciate the question.
Well, I got my postcard already, so.
Excellent.
So if you don't mind, I'll just add a little more just flavor to what she said. So, I mean, right now, if your power goes out and it's behind a fuse and that's the clearing device, we won't know. You'll know you have power out. We won't know you have power out. With smart meters, we're going to know when you know, basically. And then as we're trying to, electrify everything in the world, we don't have super good data on how transformers are loaded and other infrastructure. Having all this information is going to help us decide, we need this transformer replaced or a bigger line here. It's going to really help us optimize, like she mentioned. Like, it's going to have a huge impact saving money by not spending when you don't have to. But the billing part is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a ton more benefits that we'll glean over time, and then we'll add more projects to it.
Would you have the capability to remotely kill a circuit? For example, the circuit that charges your electric car, so that you could prevent people from charging between 4 and 9?
No, currently, right now, that's not part of this program. We do not have that. We could remotely disconnect service if we had a policy or procedures in place to do so. That is not also part of this project to get that implemented. But the meters themselves would not have the capability to turn off individual circuits at this time.
Are we ever moving to that? In other words?
Like for a non-pay, doing a...
No. I'm just thinking that the grid has a problem in the summer every afternoon between 4 and 9, right? We'd really like people not to charge their electric cars during that period.
Right.
And so, the capability of being able to control that.
Probably the way we would...
I mean, assuming somebody signs up for it,
Right.
We're not going to unilaterally do something to somebody that they don't know about, but that capability,
Yeah, most likely through rates, we would want to
Rates.
incentivize people to charge at a different time, so they wouldn't even want to charge at the bad
You
time.
make the rate high enough and people
Yeah.
will say, okay, most will say, I will obey.
I need to run my air conditioner, but I could put off, charging my electric car.
Yep.
So, I don't know about the rate thing.
Now, with all the new construction going on, are they doing the installs now, or they?
That's a great, I appreciate the question. Yes, we actually implemented that just within the last couple of weeks. So since then, we've already installed over 200 advanced meters into the new construction areas. So, and that will continue. Roseville will take on those installations, and we'll work those in conjunction with our contractor. But that has started, and we're already seeing information coming in, which was great.
So, electric shutoffs, what about water shutoffs? I had a pipe break several years ago, and the city was there in minutes, and, we turned off the water. But with these meters, they wouldn't be able to do that because the water lines are all,
No, our meters will not shut water off.
they would identify,
Absolutely. So with the information that we receive, we can identify leaks much quicker, constant flow, things of that nature. That information is already being captured right now, and we're working through how to use it, what it means to us as we move to a larger scale. But as far as water shutoffs from an installation perspective, it'll be few and far between. If we do have to shut your water off as part of the installation process, we will notify you and knock. But normal, once they're installed, we will not be, as part of this program, we're not shutting off water as part of that process.
So if the city gets an alert that you have a leak, a water leak, do they go out to the residents? What happens at that point?
I would say that program's just in its basic infancy stages, just learning what the data. We just have data on 800 customers right now, so I think we need some time to really dive into how best we address and work with those customers, and not just a immediate response. We need to look at trends and things like that. But I know that our water team has already started to kind of start that assessment, and we'll be working through that over the next year for sure.
I'm done.
No, I appreciate the questions. Thank you.
All right, is there anyone from the public that would like to come forward and address the commission on this item? All right, thank you for the update, Caitlin.
Thank you.
Next up, item 6.3, Roseville Electric Utility 2023 Summer Preparedness Plan Overview. Report by Electric Operations Manager Jason Grace, Assistant Electronics Utility Director Bill Forsyth, and Communications and Marketing Manager Aaron Fry, providing an overview of Roseville Electric Utilities 2023 Summer Preparedness Plan for information.
Good evening. Thank you for having us.
Flowing.
So I'm Jason Grace. I'm the operations manager here, your operations manager. We've got, Aaron over there and Bill to my left. So we're going to talk to you today about what the utility does as a collected effort every year, annually, in preparation for our peak summer load. So as many of you already know, it sounds like you're pretty well informed. Roseville is a summer peaking utility, as is most of the utilities in this area. Generally, that's geographically speaking, it's our climate zone. If we were maybe near the ocean or up high in the mountains, it might be different. There are winter peaking utilities, but that's not us. So we have a lot of work to do every year, and it's kind of a constant rotation. So we can go ahead and go to the next one. There we go. So there are four what we'll call core areas of the plan. Now, this is a team effort. There are several divisions within electric that all pitch into this to make sure. It used to be that we did all these efforts independently, and then a number of years ago, we got together and kind of coordinated those efforts, so it was more of a one-shot under an umbrella, so everybody knew what the other hand, was doing. The power grid, the first one you see there, that includes our physical delivery system. And then you have emergency preparedness. That's a lot of our standard operating procedures, things like that. Power supply and generation. We got to make sure that we actually have power feeding into the system, and what do we do with the generation plants that can actually also feed the system. And then, of course, communications, because nothing is going to function correctly without proper communications. Right here, this is just an idea of what you're looking at in terms of assets on the system. We have roughly 29,000 what we'll call things on there. We got equipment, we have poles. What you're looking at there is just kind of a sampling. The green boxes you see all over town. We've got over, I'd say, about 20,000 of those. And a lot of the wires, which you're going to see in the next picture, that's where they terminate or run through, is in that type of equipment. The poles you see in the upper right, Roseville has right around 4,300 poles, so not really a lot as far as utilities are concerned. On the lower right, you see a picture of some work in a substation. Now, we've got 18 locations like that, 16 substations and 2 switch yards. And the substations in our generation plant are very much like our distribution system. We have a 43 square mile electric system. If you take all that and you put it into a square, maybe a 10-acre square, that's what you're looking at our generation plants. There's a lot of moving parts and pieces that all have to be maintained. So when you think of it, if everything goes right, when we're generating power, it's an instantaneous thing that you're basically using in your home or your business. So many things have to go absolutely perfect for that to happen, and it takes a lot of effort on our part to make sure that we can do that. We're very proud of that. So the picture on your left, that depicts our underground system. Now, we're roughly 85% underground. I think I might have heard that earlier, too. And that picture on the right, that's our overhead system. And you'll notice you could take that darker blue overhead, put it right in over the top of the one on the left, the lighter blue. That's our system in its entirety. We have over 800 miles, circuit miles of underground, and 144 overhead circuit miles. So for Roseville, in a 43 square mile box, that's a lot of plant. And what that gives us is a lot of redundancy. There's a lot of the utilities, they don't have that. So we're able, in a lot of cases, if there's an issue, say a vehicle accident to one of those pieces of equipment, you may see a momentary outage or you may not see anything because we're able to route power from another direction in order to keep everybody running until we can get it, assessed and restored and get you back to normal. Ideally, you won't see any of that. It all happens in the background, but sometimes it's big enough that we're stuck with whatever the incident is. So this is just kind of a depiction of what we got to do. We got to plan basically around our peak, so kind of scheduling all the work to happen during the off-peak times that might have an impact on how we can supply power. So we've got ongoing things. All these systems are big enough that we have to have ongoing inspections. So that's taking place year-round. It never stops. We have people dedicated to that. We'll pull in others as we need to. If we find something, that might generate, a work order. Could be a mild or a low-priority work order, something we can take care of maybe when the system is on a lower part of demand. Or it could be something that needs an immediate, like a reactive impact, and we got to do it now. That does happen. It's rare, but it can. It is a functioning system, and things can happen to it. There's also other outside factors, weather, vehicles, collisions, stuff like that, and sometimes things just break. You can maintain it all you want, but when it hits, 30 to 40 years old, it can happen. So we basically will try to schedule everything we can. That's kind of what this is depicting. We kind of rate it does it require an outage? If it does, let's see if we can wait on it. If not, can we go ahead and work on it, either energized or route the power around the issue, fix the problem so that the customers don't see a lax in power. And customers really want their power midsummer and late summer when it gets over 100 degrees, so we really, really strive to not take them out. So we have to look at other issues too that could affect our system. Now, wildfires is one of those issues. In fact, the state mandates that we do this every year. Roseville is very fortunate. We are in what's called a low-impact area. So we are not in an elevated or an extreme areas defined by the state, and you can see that on the map there. Kind of when you start getting up past Auburn, that's where you start running into that, meaning that we have, in an urban area like we are, enough fire department power and mutual aid contracts that there's really little to no concern of a fire getting out of Roseville, starting in Roseville on the electric system and making its way all the way up there and turning into a huge statewide catastrophe. In addition to that, because we're not laying in one of those areas, we don't have to perform public safety power shutoffs. The PSPS that you probably hear, PG&E, for instance, may have to shut down a small transmission line or a certain section of their grid if the wind picks up and it's a hot day and conditions are right where they might start a fire, and then people could be off anywhere from hours to days depending on that weather event. Roseville does not need to do that. So a lot of you might remember a few years ago, I think it was in 2018, we had the campfire up in Paradise. And at a certain point during that fire, maybe 3 weeks in, we had smoke that was so dense it covered Roseville. And it covered it pretty hard for a while. It looked like Mars. It was hard to operate, hard to see a far distance, and that the smoke particulates, it collected on everything. Anything you can think of, it was able to stick to it like a magnet. So that caused us to have to do a lot more on our power grid. And when you look at things like the generation plant, some of the lessons that we learned from that, some good takeaways was, hey, normally you don't have to have as many filters and stuff on hand. But in an event like this, you're changing them out every hour. And that's not something that's normal. So it kind of helped us pre-plan even before the pandemic. We were in a very good position in a lot of areas like that because events like this, even though it didn't happen in Roseville, we could learn from it, and we did get some residual, but we tried to turn that into a positive. This slide here, emergency procedures. Electric has a lot of procedures. We're pretty heavily regulated. More than that, though, we're very proud of where we're at. We're proud of the fact that customers don't have to experience outages very often here, in some cases 20 years. And we strive to maintain that level. We are very proud of that level. So because of that, there's a number of things that we have to go through that we review every year. That includes like our Department Operating Center, and that's like a command and control center should we need it. We can open that up if we have a major event. We've done that before. Our outage notifications, how does that process work internally? And then, of course, externally, how do we get that information to the customers? But we got to communicate with our crews. We got to get the people on the ground in the know, and the information that they're looking at needs to get back to our emergency center so we can see what's going on and make informed decisions. This gets into our load shedding and other priorities. How do we restore power? Where do we restore power and when? Sometimes there's timing things that have to be considered. And if it's a big enough event, then we're going to coordinate that with fire and police, if needed. Then they'll open up their emergency center and we'll all work together. So a number of emergency procedures that we go through, but all of them basically to maintain the high level, the high standard that we've already set.
All right, thank you, Jason. So my name is Bill Forsyth. I oversee the power supply portfolio and also our assets we have in Roseville, the generating plants. So I'll give you a little overview on how we look for this summer, talk a little more broadly about what we saw last year and how Roseville looks, how our BA looks, and also how the ISO is looking for this summer. So for the summer of 2023, we have about 400 megawatts of capacity to serve load. The expected peak load is about 338 megawatts. So that's what's known as a 1 and 2. It's a 50-50 that we have that happen any given year. Potential concerns we have right now, we have the Roseville Energy Park. We do have an outage on CT2. We expect that back mid-July. What we've done to offset that outage is we purchased a product from our partner WAPA to cover us for July. Next slide. So this is a look back at last September. This was a surprising event for Roseville, for the whole grid. Usually you don't see a peak event like this in September. It's usually July or August. So we had, if you look at those colored bars there, so the yellow and the red bars, those are above what we would expect, above the 1 and 2 that we would expect for the month of September. If you look at the red bars, those 4 red bars are higher than any previous September peak we'd ever had. And that dark red bar on September 6th, That's higher than any peak in any month that Roseville's ever seen. A little bit of scale on this. So our average September day, not the 1 and 2 peak, just an average September day is about 217 megawatts. We expect and we plan that we're going to 50-50, we'll see 298. Prior to this last September, the highest we had ever seen in September was 327 megawatts. So on September 6th, we had a peak that was 44 megawatts higher than any prior September day, and it was 16 megawatts higher than any day we had ever seen. And the previous peak was in June of 2017. So to give you kind of how this looked from the California ISO perspective, the ISO went into 2022 expecting a 1 and 2 of about almost 46,000 megawatts, and their 1 in 10 forecast was about 51,500 megawatts. And the actual demand they had exceeded 52,000 on that day. And they were very, very close to having to shed load across the ISO footprint. That chart's pretty hard to read, but I think the kind of the big takeaway there is we had 10 straight days that the ISO had restricted all maintenance of any units on their system. And all those days had flex alert. And all but September 2nd, they had energy emergency alert watch. And they had 4 straight days where they were at EEA2, which EEA2 is you've used everything and you're having to dig into your reserves. And on September 6th, they hit an EEA3, and EEA3 is prepare to start shedding load. You've more or less lost control of your system. So just a little bit about the supply, and I think there's a couple interesting points to this. One of them is you can see that 50% of the ISO grid was served by thermal plants and peakers. Renewables were 21%. The other thing I'd highlight is storage was 2%. You know, you'll hear that there's a lot of batteries being cited. When it comes time to perform, the state's not getting a lot of supply is not being met by batteries yet.
They spend a lot of money on it.
So if you go to, thank you. So just to give you some context, so the ISO is about 80% of the California demand. Roseville, we're in the Balancing Authority of Northern California. RBA, we share that with SMUD, Modesto Irrigation District, Redding Electric, and our partner WAPA. And we're the little orange spots on there. So it's just kind of give you a sense of how big we are compared to the ISO. So next slide. So looking at 2023, the outlook for bank is very good. The forecasted 1 and 2 peak is about 4,400 megawatts. The 10-year event, the 1 in 10 or 10-year event is about 4,700 megawatts. And we're going into this as a BA, an entire balancing authority, with nearly 5,800 megawatts of supply. So from a planning reserve margin standpoint, for the expected event, the 1 and 2 event, we're sitting about 121%. And if we had a 10-year event, we still have adequate resources, sitting about 113%. So for Roseville, our forecasted peak, as you saw on the previous slide, is 338. Our supply in some months is over 400. The worst months this summer is about 400. So we're going into this. Good utility practice is 115%. Given our outage for a couple weeks in July, we're sitting about 115. For the rest of July, we'll be about 120. And for the remainder of the summer, we're sitting about 120% of the expected event. So just give you a little look at what the ISO, how they look. So since September 1st of last year, the ISO has added another 3,000 megawatts of renewables, about 2,300 megawatts of batteries, and they do expect to have some additional renewables and batteries by September 2023. Their hydro conditions across the state are above average, but the one thing about the ISO supply is they're still very reliant on imports.
Thank you, Bill. Erin Fry, Public Information Officer for Roseville Electric, and want to talk a little bit about all of this coming together and how we inform our residents, especially as we've seen these heat-related grid emergencies peak earlier and longer since 2019. A critical component for our customers is obviously communicating early and often. So we want our customers to be aware of available resources and what they can do to make an impact on these grid situations prior to an emergency alert situation, as we saw for such an extended period of time last September. So in order to do that, we really encourage our customers to be prepared, and we did that by really doing a concentrated outreach campaign starting in 2020. After we saw the public safety power shutoff start in August of 2019, we understood that this was becoming more of a reality for the community surrounding Roseville, and obviously with the communication that we see throughout the greater Sacramento region, that has an immediate impact on our customers and causes an increased level of concern. So since that time, we've done outreach that typically starts in late May into early June. But over the last 2 years, we've seen these peak events go from June to more into the September timeframe, as we saw last year. So again, this summer, we will have our Plan Ahead campaign that reaches both our residential and commercial customers, and I'll speak a little bit more about what those calls for conservation and what resources are available. But what we found last year, as we saw that extended peak in September, was really how we can coordinate with the other departments within the city of Roseville. We understand when we get to these high heat situations, when we're opening cooling centers throughout the city, and when our customers are receiving that constant communication, not only from Roseville Resources, but also as PG&E gas customers, and they're hearing communication from other neighboring utilities, that it's important that we can explain what resources and what impact they can see here in our community. Oftentimes, in an emergency situation, that first outreach occurs with our public safety agencies. So even though it is a grid-related emergency, our police and fire departments are very impacted when we get into those high heat situations. So being coordinated heading into the summer is very important to us as we begin to look at opening a department operations center, or what we need to do to escalate if it gets into opening the emergency management center for the city of Roseville. So that increased significantly last summer. We had daily meetings and have a plan in place where we've shared that information ahead of time with those departments so that we have a coordinated effort in terms of if we did get to worst case scenario with a load shedding event here in Roseville, what impact that have and what resources we have available, not only from the electric side, but throughout the city. We also understand that one size does not fit all when it comes to communication, so we have really expanded what channels we are using throughout the years. Traditional email, messaging, social media communication that is constant through all of the channels, including emergency alerts through our next door neighborhood groups, Facebook and Twitter, but more importantly, enhancing our outage communication system, which we launched in fall of 2021 to include text message outreach. I'm sure for many of you, when we saw that peak heading into the September 6th event, what really prevented us from shedding load during that time, not particularly here in Roseville, but throughout the state of California, was a text message alert that was sent from the governor's office. And we saw an immediate decrease in usage, which helped prevent a load shedding event. So we do have that capability through our outage communication system. Anybody who has a registered cell phone number can receive an outage communication if they are in line for potential load shedding, but also more importantly to send out calls for conservation here in Roseville to make sure we have the resources available. And as always, it's critical before an emergency happens to be prepared, which includes having an emergency kit available prior to a potential outage. And that is important not only during the summer months, but year-round. Conservation is key, and I know I've heard it already this evening about the peak hours and the usage that we see. And so really changing behavior and getting that message out so our customers become more accustomed to when they're using their electricity. So as we head into the heat, which we're about to see this weekend, our customers are already aware, or we hope are aware, to really shift major usage, whether that be charging your electric vehicle or using your major appliances, to outside of those peak hours. Do that overnight, do that early in the morning, so that we're reducing that impact. We understand air conditioners are not going to go off for many of our customers, but being able to push that other unnecessary usage to off-peak hours makes a huge difference for the resources we have available here and throughout the state. And what we really try to mention is that small steps, it could really be 2 degrees that make a huge difference if each resident and commercial customer could do that in Roseville. That leads to a significant resource change here and also helps us support neighboring utilities within our balancing authority or throughout the state of California. And staying informed. We know up-to-date real-time information is critical, especially in these emergency or potential emergency situations. And we all play a huge part in making sure that that information is available when it's most needed. We do have a number of resources available where customers can ensure their contact information is up to date. And we encourage someone, please log in. We have a customer self-service portal that's very easy to use where you can make updates to your own account. So we have cell phone information, updated email information. So when we get into these situations and pushing those communications out, it's reaching you when you're needing it the most. Also, as I mentioned earlier, we do have text notification available. So in the case of a potential outage or a major call for conservation, when we do get into those emergency alert situations, we can push that messaging out. When we first started the program, we had just under 27,000 customers that were registered, and we are now well into close to 50,000 customers registered for text notifications. So that is a huge tool for us to be able to continue to promote that avenue, because that is the way for us to get information out quickly and as accurately as possible. In some of these scenarios, especially when we get into an emergency alert 3 situation, sometimes we might only have 45 minutes to an hour in terms of turning off power for certain customers. So being able to push out an immediate notification through this text notification system is a critical component for us. And then, of course, a plug to follow us on social media. We're posting constant information and try to keep residents updated. We're also sharing that on social media channels throughout the city and on our public safety agency sites. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions regarding anything you heard from our presentation this evening.
All right, do any commissioners have questions for the staff at this time?
One comment. You mentioned those critical dates of September 6th last year. I looked earlier today, and there was 113 degrees that day, those 2 days. I don't know, we're not going to see that too often, so.
I think our SCADA actually recorded closer to 116
Really? Yeah.
on that day.
Yeah. Now, that's really unusual.
And I hope we don't see it.
Amen.
I hate to be the contrarian, just a little bit, but, I personally really appreciate that Roseville plans like we do. I think, appreciate your presentation, and making sure that we've got enough generation to cover our load. The state isn't quite doing as good a job as the city of Roseville, and so, the idea that we might need to alert our customers that they need to cut back because the state's close to failing in the electric grid, that doesn't help anybody, and I would want that to happen. But I am annoyed that we get shoved into this situation by the policies of the state rather than simply have enough generation ready and available like we did for the last 100 years. Suddenly we're in a situation where we're tinkering with disaster at a public policy level, and so I'm appreciate that we're doing everything that we can for Roseville residents on both ends of the scale. On the end of the scale where we're making sure that we have enough to where we have our load covered, and that we're able to jump in and help by alerting our customers if, in fact, that's what it takes to help the state not have a complete disaster. So, anyway, there was no question in there, but I appreciate being able to make a statement.
So two things. I think I know the answer to this. But black starting, does that mean you're starting from total shutoff?
Yes.
Okay. And the other thing, because this acronym BANK, do we have the ability, like the banks do, to borrow from somebody else? Can we go and can we borrow from a neighboring, I don't know, irrigation district, power authority, if we get a situation?
Yeah, so, balancing authority area, first of all, it's an interconnected grid. So, Bank, we're connected to the California ISO. We're connected to the Northwest. We're connected to, the ISO is connected to Nevada. So, first of all, you've got a highly interconnected grid, but each balancing authority takes care of its own responsibilities. Another balancing authority area, if they can, will help you out. But, so.
And then the other thing, because this kind of came up, but you were mentioning, telling people don't use power between certain times of day and night, or, I'm sorry, evening. I've been in my house for 20-odd years, and programmable thermostat, I mean, that thing, it turns itself off. I mean, are we doing any education outreach or offering people how to use your programmable thermostat, or?
That's a great question. And yeah, programmable thermostats, the smart thermostats, are the most effective way for conservation measures, not only to save energy, but also to save you money. So we do have a number of programs and advisors on hand. We actually, heading into COVID, increased our rebate for programmable thermostats, understanding what kind of impact they can make here in Roseville and for our customers. So that was something that we have and we continue to offer to this day, understanding what kind of difference they can make. It becomes something you don't have to act on. They can act on your behalf based on your patterns and the needs.
Okay, and I always have one more. Battery walls. So, Solar City's on the radio. I'm coming over here, and we'll install a battery wall, and you can flick that thing on when, yes, no, maybe? Have we got there yet with battery walls? I guess that's my question.
I'm not sure I completely understand the question.
Okay, so I'll give an example. So my in-laws live up the hill, PG&E land, power goes out all the time. So he installed the solar system with the battery wall, and then when the power goes out, you flip on that battery wall, because hopefully you've absorbed enough solar. Are battery walls a viable option, or?
I think part of the answer to that would be a matter of battery capacity and electric load. So a lot of batteries, when they're installed, they generally only run, maybe one or a small handful of circuits. It might go to a fridge and a freezer, but it doesn't necessarily power the whole home.
Okay.
It certainly probably isn't enough power to, say, run your air conditioner. Or if it is, maybe you get 40 minutes out of it. It really depends on how that system is configured, how it's interconnected, and what it was designed for. Now, a lot of things are scalable. You might be able to put in some smaller batteries to get something started and maybe save your food, and then over time, maybe you can add more to it. But it's really unique per installation, so there's not really a good blanket answer today, because there's not a lot of them out there right now on our system.
Okay, so back to your question, charging your electric car, could you get a Tesla battery wall that would suck in enough solar that you could charge your car overnight with it, or we're not there yet? I'm kind of getting off here on a lot of it.
No, it's a great question. I just want to make sure I understand it. So are you saying, can you power
Well,
your?
I mean, could you? Yeah, so there's an issue that's a concern about people going to come home during peak hours, plug their cars in, and we're going to have a big drawdown on power. But if you had a battery wall, could you plug the car into the battery wall? Like, you're like charging your phone.
And then use the battery wall to charge the car?
Right.
Well, in theory, yes. But again, it depends on the insulation, exactly. And,
Money, right?
well, with enough of that, you probably could get any of the things that you're talking about done. But with the batteries especially, they take up space. So you could literally have to have maybe a big Connex box in your backyard in order to power your house for an entire day. It just depends on your load characteristics, how you use the power, and maybe you have a very low usage. My family might be very high.
Right.
So it kind of depends on the characteristics of that customer and how they use that load. And then you would kind of size that system accordingly, but it also depends on your budget. That can get very expensive, very pricey. That escalates quickly. Almost exponential when you want to get into whole house type of installations. Did that help?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. Now I can disregard those ads on the radio.
Any other questions? All right, is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward and address the commission on this item? All right, thank you for the overview, Jason, Bill, and Aaron.
Thank you.
Next item, 6.4, Environmental Utilities Monthly Update. Report by Environmental Utilities Assistant Director Sean Bigley, summarizing the monthly status of environmental utilities activities for information.
Good evening, Chair Knox and members of the Public Utilities Commission. I'm Sean Bigley. I'm an Assistant Environmental Utilities Director, and so it's my pleasure tonight to give you a brief update on activities related to environmental utilities. And so I've got several updates. I'll try to be brief, but just wanted to kind of provide the information on various activities within all three utilities. So first, related to the Pleasant Grove wastewater treatment plant. So the Pleasant Grove expansion project is now fully functional and operating. We now have a contract that was recently executed to start land applying Class B biosolids generated from the digesters, diverting nearly 16,000 tons of sludge from the landfill annually. Also, digester gas is being produced and being delivered to the Energy Recovery Project. So on the Energy Recovery Project that's also on site at Pleasant Grove Wastewater Treatment Plant, that project is also fully functioning and operating. We're utilizing high-strength organic waste, which is being received and fed into the new digesters to increase digester gas production. Additionally, digester gas is being conditioned and compressed into renewable compressed natural gas. With that gas, refuse trucks are actively being fueled using that renewable natural gas. Moving on to the next topic is our popular neighborhood cleanup program. So we have 4 events that have been completed at various locations, 2 events in May and 2 events in June. And the totals for that event include 71 dumpsters of trash that were collected during those events. We unloaded approximately 1,300 vehicles during those 4 events. And there was over 132 tons of waste hauled as a result of those events. So those are very popular. It allows folks to basically take items that they need to discard and have the ability to put those into dumpsters, and we take care of that. And really the net effect is it prevents a lot of illegal dumping in the city, and it's a really effective way to be able to have folks do it in an efficient, clean manner. So. Moving on to our ASR program, I just want to note that our ASR wells 9 and 18, also known as our Solaire and Westbrook wells, are in the commissioning process nearing completion, and we're currently in the process of amending our ASR well permit as a result. In addition, I do want to report that so far this year, we've been able to actually recharge surface water into the groundwater basin, and that amount is approximately 1,900 acre-feet of water. That equates to about 3,800 households worth of water for an entire year. Earlier this year, we were able to enter into a Section 215 water contract with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, and so that's allowed us to take excess water that's considered unstorable from Folsom Reservoir and take that water, treat that water, and then through our distribution system actually recharge that water into the groundwater basin. We are seeing, recently Reclamation did cut off that recharge supply, and that's really just based on current conditions. They have a cubic feet per second limitation in terms of when they allow recharge to happen through the Section 215 contract. That's about 8,000 CFS in terms of inflow into the reservoir. And at this point in time, although runoff is still occurring, it's definitely not, it's well below 8,000 CFS at this point in time. So at this point, it's hard to say if we're going to see any additional recharge through the rest of the season. Probably not likely, but we'll keep you posted if that resumes. Also want to address 2 new ASR groundwater wells that we are about ready to start construction on, and this is the bottom portion of construction within those wells. Those are 2 wells that are located in the Campus Oaks development area, as well as a well that is in the Misty Woods neighborhood area. The mobilization for the Misty Woods, the mobilization for the Campus Oaks well is scheduled to start July 5th, and the mobilization at the Misty Woods well is scheduled to be July 26th. And with that, we do anticipate that construction will be complete ahead of our October 2023 deadline for that bottom portion of construction. And then after that, the topside construction will begin fairly shortly after that. Big Truck Summer, popular event. Just want to report that we've had 4 events so far. An event for water, waste services, and wastewater. We've had a water, waste services so far. Roseville Electric also participated in the event in early June. So far, we've had 3,700 folks attend. It's really popular with the kids, and we've done this for several years. Good way to showcase utility services and gain just a lot of good public benefit and public appreciation for what folks are doing out there to provide good utility service. On June 29th, from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. at Mahaney Park, our wastewater collection trucks will be out there, and that will wrap up that series of events. And then finally, I just want to end with just a quick report on AB 1572. I know there's been some interest in this bill. Just a really quick summary of that. This is the bill that is a subject of essentially more or less a ban on non-functional turf in commercial areas. If you recall, there's through a series of emergency declarations over time, the governor had imposed a temporary ban on watering of what's considered non-functional turfs in commercial areas. Those executive orders do have expiration dates. And the executive order, this portion of the executive order had been extended and is still active. So the introduction of AB 1572, the author's intent is essentially to codify this effort into state law. And what it would do is essentially define what is non-functional turf, and would more or less ban the watering of that turf. There are some exceptions to that. In terms of where the bill is at this point in time, the bill has made it through the California State Assembly. It's currently in the California State Senate. It is been heard by the Natural Resources and Water Committee on the Senate side and has been re-referred for an additional hearing on the bill. And just really quick, I just want to go through currently where we're at, or where the legislature is at on this bill. So this is as of June 19th. There has been some adjustments in terms of definition of functional turf. There was some concern in terms of how they were defining it, whether turf behind a fence is considered non-functional. But if you think about many parks have fences where there's turf behind it. So there was some clarification to make sure that they weren't classifying parks, which are functional areas, as non-functional. They also removed multifamily housing from the bill. And I can get into the reason why on that. And then also in terms of maintaining the health of trees that exist in areas that are considered to be non-functional, there are some provisions in there to protect those areas that do have trees so that the tree canopy is not destroyed as a result of banning the watering of turf in those non-functional areas. To be clear, the bill states that the enforcement is, by default, is by the state of California. Local agencies have the option to enforce if they wish to, if this bill ends up being approved. And essentially, the way that the prohibitions would start is starting in January 1st, 2027 for properties owned or leased by the Department of General Services, i.e. state properties. This prohibition would go into effect. And then also for properties owned by local or regional agencies and public water systems, the ban would also go into effect by the same date. For all other institutional commercial properties, the ban would go into effect January 1st, 2028. With respect to HOAs or common interest developments, the ban would begin January 1st, 2029. And then properties owned by local governments or public agencies that are considered to be within disadvantaged communities, they would not be prohibited from using potable water until 2031. So there's a series of different effect dates on that. And in terms of just the responsibility for public agencies, it would require the city of Roseville to revise our municipal code to at least acknowledge that this is a requirement in state law. However, there is delegated authority, I guess, to the local agencies in terms of whether they want to enforce or not. And then in terms of just in terms of different types of square footage triggers, there's certain reporting aspects that are included in terms of reporting back to the State Water Resource Control Board in terms of compliance. And then some other reporting requirements that I won't get into. So that is pretty much it on that bill. This is something that the city has been very active in terms of making sure we're engaged and making sure we protect the city's interests. So again, because I think there's interest that's been expressed in this bill, I just wanted to bring it forward in this report tonight. So with that, I'll conclude there and see if there's any questions that anybody has.
Any commissioners have questions for staff at this time?
I do. Thank you, Sean. I appreciate you looking at this 1572. I've been sort of worried that Southern California's problem, water shortage problem, they've got to find a way to solve it, and I don't want them to solve it by taking our water. So I would guess that this bill won't affect Southern California at all, because I'm sure that all those instances of ornamental turf have already been eliminated, right? So this is going to affect Northern California.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're the ones that still have ornamental turf because we still have an adequate water supply. We haven't overbuilt and overdrafted our resources like Southern California has. And so, you know, but if it's only commercial, of course, you know, then HOAs are going to be restricted. There'll be no common landscaping.
Yeah, there's some restrictions relative to that. In terms of definition, there's going to be probably some finer definition, and I can circle back on that particular item. But
I mean, Roseville has lots of very attractive landscapes in public places that we all enjoy because we have an adequate water supply. And Southern California would rather that we leave that water in the river so that they can pump it to Southern California. And I'd rather enjoy our landscapes. So I appreciate whatever efforts the city can do to, you know, because this is step one. Step two will be residential.
Sure.
What's turf anyway? Grass, lawn?
yeah, so
Okay.
grass,
Yeah,
lawn.
'cause I think my brother lives in they have an HOA, and they've already gone ahead, and they pulled out all the lawn, and they put in bark, ground cover, junipers, cotoneaster, that kind of stuff. So it's already, they had a vote on it and everything, but it's already done, so, okay.
Oh, you're in the area?
No, he's in Benicia, but anyway. Kind
Nice
of
to live
jumped the
there
gun
a
on
while.
it, yeah.
Any other questions? All right. Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward and address the commission on this item? Thank you for the update, Sean. Next item, 6.5, Environmental Utilities Water Efficiency Section Overview. Presentation by Water Conservation Administrator Bobby Alvarez with an overview of water efficiency operation for information.
Yeah, so I just want to briefly do a brief introduction. So Bobby Alvarez, he's our water efficiency administrator, and so he's on the front lines of all things water efficiency. So obviously, this is something that his group, if this, what we just talked about is put into law, will affect. And also, and Bobby will get into this, his group and what they do is highly determined and regulated by what the state of California wishes local agencies to do. So with that in mind, he has a really good team and they do really good work, and Bobby will talk a little bit about that. So thank you.
Thank you, Sean. No pressure. Good evening. And thank you for having me here tonight. Next slide, please. So I want to just go over quickly the agenda. I'm going to talk a little bit about efficiency and staff and what we do, the water supply and drought update, weather and lake conditions, water reduction, a little bit on legislation and water loss, our gallon per capita daily. I will cover residential gallon per capita daily during that time as well, and some marketing outreach and projects and events. Next slide, please. So we have a staff of 6 full-time employees. We have 2 vacancies right now for 1,500-hour temps that have not been hired yet. They will be doing a lot of the patrol. One of our primary focus is to educate both commercial and residential customers. One of our most popular programs is our residential water-wise house call. We also do commercial valuations, rebates, high-use investigations. We do have a water waste patrol in the evenings as well to cover folks that are abusing water late in the evenings. We do it-yourself classes over at the RUEC. We oversee some of the legislation that Sean was talking about. We also do the plan checks for the water efficient landscape ordinance and some state and federal reporting. So a little bit on the drought update. We are out of the drought. And this is just a series of events that have occurred as a result of getting to where we are today. Just briefly, the Bureau projected that Folsom Lake would be full by May, which they were correct. We do now have a full allocation of 100% of our contract supply. So for this year, through the summer and into next year, we're going to be fine with our water supply. The executive order on March 24th ended the 15% reduction target, ended the requirement of level 2 drought stage, and banned on wasteful usage, and one of them on the ban was non-functional turf. The state's emergency regulation from the state board, it remained in effect till June 10th, and we were required to stay in drought stage 2 for regulatory compliance. But at that point, we started to discontinue the drought messaging, and we maintained the public outreach along with encouraging our customers to, and we always want to encourage our customers to use water efficiently. We offered rebates, and then the city manager officially rescinded the city's stage 2 drought on June 14th.
Right.
Next slide. Quickly, this is what the state of California looks like as of June 15th. Basically, there was no drought recorded, but same time last year, you can see the map, and we were in extreme drought for pretty much the entire state. Next slide. Here's our precipitation We had a great precipitation season. We were 123% above average. Next slide. And this is how that rain fell. And it was fell actually in good timing because a lot of that rain turned into snow up in the Sierras, so which gave us a good snowpack. Next slide. This is what our snowpack looked like for north, central, and south. Again, a phenomenal snow year. We are towards the end of the season. In fact, in the central portion, this was a week ago, the snow is melting relatively fast right now. And central portion is at about 21 inches now. I'm guessing after this weekend, which is going to be pretty warm, it's probably going to melt. There's going to be very little left up there. Next slide, please. This is Folsom Lake, and I'm going to have to change that picture because it's beautiful right now. It is at 94% capacity and 119% of historical average. Next slide. This is because it is predominantly flood control. This is how they operated the lake. The inflows and the releases pretty much sustained that 94, 95% capacity level. Next slide. Shasta Lake, this is a real picture of Shasta Lake, most recent one. It is at 96% capacity, which we haven't seen that in a really long time, and 120% of historical average. Next slide, please. And they're pretty much maintaining that 94, 95% average. They still want to leave a little bit of space for the remaining snow melt. Next slide, please. And over the state, we see a lot of blue on this picture, which is really nice. A lot of the lakes throughout California are pretty full. And this is a good picture. We haven't seen this in quite some time. Next slide, please. This is the monthly water production compared to the base year. And the base year that Governor Newsom appointed was 2020. And as we compare to 2020, as you can see, based on what was produced in 2020 and what's produced now, last month in May, we were 10.5% less than what we actually used the same time in 2020. Good trend going there. But keep in mind, a lot of the reason for this is the good winter that we had and all the precipitation that we had. Next slide, please. This is an annual water production and consumption, the orange bar being the consumption and the gray bar being water production. And the numbers there are in acre feet that show the difference between the two. Slide, please. A little bit about legislation, Senate Bill 606 and Assembly Bill 1668. This is the water use efficiency bill. We've all heard about the indoor use at 55 gallon per capita daily. That's pretty much set, and those numbers are pretty much set. If you look at the outdoor use, the standard started in May, but it's expected to last 6 to 9 months. And for both indoor and outdoor, those are both residential. And so in order for us to determine what the true target is, we need that outdoor use target to be defined before we can determine where we're actually at. As we all know, residents don't have a separate irrigation meter, so it's just one meter that goes for indoor use and outdoor use. So it's hard to determine until we get that outdoor use number. The water loss standard, I do have a slide after this slide that I'll talk to. That is one standard that has been set for the city of Roseville, and we're actually doing very good in that arena. And commercial landscape standard, it's going to be some time before we get that one. Next slide, please. Here's where we stand with the performance standard for water loss. As you can see, our standard is set at 22.7, and that's gallon per capita daily of loss per meter in the city of Roseville. And a lot of the great work that the water utility has done, we've been able to get way below that standard line. Next slide. I wanted to add this slide just to quick shout out for the water distribution team. They survey almost 64 miles a year for just leak detection. Now this is over and above their day-to-day work, customer calls for leaks. This does not include any of the customer calls, but as you can see, it's about 7.8 million gallons of water that they've actually been able to save by finding these leaks that would not normally surface, but with their leak detection equipment, they were able to find them. Next slide, please. This is our gallon per capita daily. I go from 2008 down to last year. We had a very high gallon per capita daily at 290 and a lower population of just over 100,000. As you can see, over time, we've been able to get that gallon per capita daily use lowered, and the population continues to increase. So this is a really good trend. Next slide, please. This is comparing to last year, gallon per capita daily. The next one will be residential. But as you can see, again, when we have good winters and a lot of rain, our GPCD goes down. Next slide. Same for residential. Residential also covers multifamily. Same thing occurred here. I'm a little concerned that with the hot weather coming, people start turning up their irrigation systems and using more water. But I anticipate that it won't go much higher, probably equal to what we did last year. So everything I covered in terms of just being in a good position for our water supply, you know, most people will take a break. But for water efficiency, this is the time when we really have to turn up the heat a little bit, because we don't want customers, folks, commercial businesses to get complacent because we do have a lot of water. We're always trying to communicate the water efficiency message, because I think you can still, I believe that you can still have a beautiful landscape by learning how to use water efficiently. We do things like regional educational campaigns. That picture is of us at Mulch Mayhem, which is a really popular event. We do a lot of bill inserts, and we even have a monthly, we have the Inspiration Garden, which we do a monthly video of how you can detect things within your garden and how to repair them and what are the right things to do within your garden. Next slide. So a lot of projects and events going on. This is our 1-year anniversary of the Inspiration Garden. We've actually changed out some of the plants that didn't work so well. We had a shade garden there that was waiting for the tree to grow, but the tree didn't grow fast enough, so it didn't provide the shade. So we had changed that focal area. We are also doing some work in the entrance of Mahaney Park, where the Inspiration Garden is. So we're doing a lot of work there still. And before long, we'll have a lot of low water use plants throughout the courtyard. We do get a lot of people at the farmers market, at the fountains, where they ask a bunch of questions about what we offer, and we get a lot of actual Waterwise house calls from the farmers market. We have our Mulch Mayhem event, and that picture on the lower left corner, even though I showed you the picture of the group, that picture on the lower left corner is an aerial of even before we actually open the doors, because people get so excited about Mulch Mayhem that they start backing up in foothills. And so we have to bring them into the starting gate for traffic control. And one other thing I just want to mention on here, we do downtown Tuesday night as well. And we had an Earth Night, which attracted a little over 700 people. The lower right-hand corner is a big project that's happening right now over at the Westfield Galleria. They are removing all their non-functional turf and really beautifying their landscape by putting low water use plants. They are removing about 153,000 square feet. And in terms of water savings, that is 8 million gallons of water a year of water savings by removing that turf, putting in low water use plants, and that equates to supplies water to about 75 homes for an entire year in the city of Roseville. And, that's water that's not being drawn from Folsom Lake. So I think that is my last slide. Are there any questions?
Do any commissioners have questions for staff at this time?
You mentioned the water content at 337%, which is really impressive, the snow water content. What happens with it? I know that Orville is full, so is Shasta, and we're close. With this upcoming extreme weather, even like we had last year, with a sudden melt-off, are we still facing flooding around the state, northern state?
Sean, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's certainly the potential. In terms of Northern California, I think, and I'll just speak to Folsom. I mean, Folsom has obviously the existing infrastructure that was built in the 1950s, but they also have the joint federal project in play right now, which is an additional spillway where they have quite a bit of capacity to evacuate Folsom. So that's a benefit. It's a flood control benefit for the region, but it also gives the operators a little bit more flexibility in terms of being able to probably more closely go towards the flood control curve and try to maximize water storage with that. I would say if you've been tracking what's going on down in the Central Valley, particularly around Bakersfield, Kern County, they certainly have some concerns relative to flooding. They are currently seeing the old Tulare Lake Basin filling, and they've made some efforts to try to allow that to happen in an organized fashion versus having significant flooding, not only in ag land, but also in some of the communities down there. So, yeah, so it's certainly a concern that's still there, and I know they're paying attention to it. But, I mean, from a Northern California perspective, I don't think there's too much concern at this point in time in terms of significant flooding. I think they have a pretty good plan in place, and I think the operators are being very, very careful, but also very balanced in terms of how they're operating the system.
Good.
Any other questions? Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward and address the commission on this item? All right, thank you for the overview, Bobby.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is board member, commissioner, or staff reports. Are there any reports from staff? Question or comments from the commission? Does anyone have any item that they would like to suggest for future meetings? May I have a motion to adjourn?
To adjourn?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? We are adjourned.
When Orville was about to let loose a few years back,
Right.